Hey guys, it's the Diesel Queen. You may know me as either the Diesel Queen or my real name is Melissa Petersman, which is all over my profiles. You may know me from Instagram or TikTok or Facebook, whatever you know me from. I have done a lot of podcasts for Diesel Laptops. I've done a lot of podcasts for other people. I've been a guest a lot of times, but I've never actually had something that was my own. And I feel like I have a lot of knowledge to share, specifically for the women that are entering this industry, but I do think that some of you men, who are probably the majority of my following, and the people that will be watching this might get a kick out of some of my stories from the industry and some of the guests that I have on here and learning just more about me. So that is the reason. Sorry, I'm like super fidgety. I'm like ADD. That's the reason I'm starting this podcast series, and I don't really have a name for it yet, but working on that. Like I said, ADD, my brain is doing like a million miles an hour, like a million different things at once. So anyways, that's the introduction for this podcast. And let me start this first episode off with an introduction of who I am. Okay, a lot of you that are watching this probably already know who I am. You've probably been following me for a while. You're well aware that I'm a diesel mechanic. But for those of you that don't know my entire background, or for those of you that just don't actually, this is your first time coming across me, let me introduce you to myself. Now, please don't mind the phone. I have notes for this podcast on here. Again, ADD brain, my bad. Introduction of who I am. My background starts actually in like 6th grade. And no, I'm not, I promise I'm not going to be one of those people that's like, I've been doing this since I could walk. I promise. I fucking promise, okay? You gotta understand where I grew up. So I grew up in Walden, Colorado, and Laramie, Wyoming, and my parents were divorced, so I bounced back and forth between those two cities quite often. Cities. God. Walden's literally a town of 800 people, guys. I thought Laramie was a massive metropolis city when I first moved back up there with my mom. Like, my dad lived in Walden, Colorado. And so in Walden, Colorado, I was in 6th grade. So 6th or 7th grade. And they offered a welding class. Either welding or woodworking. You had to pick the two. And I had tried woodworking the first semester and I freaking hated it. And so I'm like, I'm going to take welding the second semester. And there was just this old farm guy, like just old farmer, local farmer. And I fell in love with arc welding. My first day of arc welding, I brought my dad home a little pad that I had made. And everybody that knows what welding is knows what pads are. They're just a little square piece of metal that you just run beads across to practice your welds, whatever type of weave you're using, just practice. And my dad still has that, actually. He still has that. It is sitting on the dash of the truck that I gave him, which was my high school truck. And I just loved it. I'm like, oh my God, I want to be a welder. Obviously, I was like, this was 6th grade, so that didn't last very long, and I transferred into definitely wanting to do horse training, and like, oh God, I wanted to be an astronomer, like all these fucking things. As I got older and I was spending more time in Laramie, I was in high school in Laramie, I did every single vocational class I possibly could besides woodworking. Every one besides woodworking. Ag mechanics, agriculture, welding, automotive, all of it. And I did all of them all the way through high school. And I just loved it. I liked it, but it didn't really seem like a career path for me until I turned about 17. And then I decided, you know what, I really love semis. I love them. I've always had an obsession with them. My dad's a logger. I've had an obsession with his freaking Kenworth log truck that he had, right? Obsessed. I'm like, I just love this. And I started working on my own vehicle with the help of like some of my guy friends. And I'm like, man, I really, really like this. And this is something I have a passion in, is this diesel. And well, it's either that or horse training. And there's no money in freaking horse training. So I decided, against my mother's wishes, to go to Wyotech full-time and not do any type of community college or anything. Just go to a trade school specific. And Wyotech happened to be in Laramie, which is where I graduated high school from. So I went to Wyotech and I did advanced diesel was my degree, and then I signed up for the motorsports and chassis fabrication because I wanted to hone my welding even more. Because I liked it. So I graduated twice technically, but I only walked down the graduation aisle once. With advanced diesel technology degree, and then a motorsports and chassis fabrication add-on thing. After that, I went to International in Commerce City, McCandless International, and that was actually a really decent experience. That is where my hate for Ford engines comes from, because I had to work on International engines and the parent of the freaking Power Stroke. So yeah, but it was actually a decent experience. I was super excited. I was just give me all the information, all of it. I just want to soak it all up. And I ended up leaving after about 4 months, and it wasn't anything against the dealership or anything like that. It's just like they were like out of work, and they were running out of work, and everybody but the senior technicians in that shop were getting their hours cut. So it wasn't just me, right? It was everyone that wasn't a senior technician. So about the last month of working there, I'm like, I can't afford this. So I started interviewing other places, and I actually was pretty dead set on semi-trucks. And I just could not find anything at the time that didn't want me to work night shift, because I learned the hard way that most semi shops are either flat rate, which I was not freaking ready for. There's no way. I was not ready for flat rate. I didn't want to work flat rate, and I didn't want to work nights. And as a low experienced person, I didn't really have any room to, demand that out of employers. And I could not find anyone with the position that I wanted. So I actually just, my boyfriend, he's in my ex now, but my boyfriend at the time was like, hey, I do air compressors and air compressor work at this shop called Honda Equipment, and they're a John Deere dealership. And I'm like, I don't want to work on equipment. I want to work on semis. And I'm like, after, a little bit, I'm like, you know what, I'll go in and talk to him. And I walked in and I saw all the equipment. I immediately fell in love, immediately. And I walked into that office with my full confidence, and I'm like, I would like a job application, and I would like to speak to your manager. So I did. I spoke to Troy Nevergall, and he's like, well, here, fill out this application. And I told him, I gave him a little bit. It wasn't an interview. I just gave him a little bit of a background. Like, hey, I'm out of work at the shop I'm at. I'm getting low hours. I just bought a house. I need a job. I need a job. I don't care if you hire me as the fucking shit shoveler. I need a job here. And I am willing to do the low end work and work up to, whatever you need. And I gave him an application. He told me straight up, he's like, we really are only hiring level 2 technician positions, and you're barely a level 1, just so you know. I'm like, I know. But I filled out my application and I gave it to him, and I got a call. I don't even remember how long it was, but I did get a call fairly soon, and he's like, hey, I need you to come in for an interview. I'm like, yes. So I go in for this interview, and I get an aptitude test, which is basically basic questions of mechanic stuff, what's a piston, things like that, all the way to the aptitude type of thing of there was some diagnostic technician A and B questions, there was some hydraulic questions, there was some electrical questions, all kinds of stuff. And then there was some if this gear turns this way and this gear's turning this way, which way is this gear turning, kind of thing, right? And he scored it. And then we did the actual interview. Or he didn't score it yet. He took my piece of paper and took my test. And then we did the actual interview of my background and stuff. And then he's like, all right, I'll call you back. And he reminded me, he's like, I really want to hire you. Or he's like, I'm thinking of hiring you, but I have to get it approved from the higher ups because you're not a level 2. And so I'm waiting a few days later, and he's like, can you come into the shop? So I come into the shop, and he's like, he has this test, right? One of my tests, or my aptitude test, and he's like, did you know that you only missed one question on this test? And I'm like, no. all proud of myself, right? I'm like all proud. Like, no, I mean, I felt pretty confident. I felt like the questions were fairly easy, but like I didn't know I only missed one or two. Like I got like either a 98 or a 99 on this test. And he's like, we've never had anyone score that high. I'm like, help. Sweet. I did just come out of Wyotech, by the way, so all of this information is really fresh. You know, not gonna toot my own horn. Like, all this information is super fresh, and test taking is super fresh for me. And he said, well, we're gonna offer you a position. And we're gonna offer you higher than what we would originally offer you to get you in the door. But just so you know, there's two ways we go about this. We either hire someone for a little less, and at their 6 months, we give them a really big pay raise, or we're going to give you the initial amount that's bigger, and then you're going to get less of a pay raise at 6 months, or no pay raise, right? So, and they offered me like 75 cents an hour more than international. And I'm like, fuck yeah, dude. So I wasn't even expecting a pay raise at all. So yeah, then I worked for Hanan Equipment under the crane division, because Hanan Equipment in Commerce City is a big enough shop that there is a crane division for Manitowoc Cranes, because they were a Manitowoc crane dealership, John Deere construction, and then Workin paving equipment. So I started under, it was all one shop, they just had different supervisors, different service managers, or foremen as they call them, that all worked underneath Troy. And so the first foreman guy that I worked underneath, his name was Derek, and I worked underneath the crane department, and I actually had a great time with Derek. Some people think that he's an asshole, but I got along great with Derek. Talked shit to each other, it was fine. There was another female in that shop that had a problem with him, like, because he's an asshole, but I didn't personally. Me and Derek were kind of on the same level with a lot of things, but that was a good experience. And I worked under the crane department for about 4 months helping Derek out, and then after that they wanted to move me to the John Deere side. I'm sorry if I keep looking up, by the way, my monitor is right there. I went to the John Deere side and worked under Rick, and Rick is a phenomenal boss. He is a phenomenal foreman, one of the best that I've ever worked with. And he set me next to, over the course of the next 3 years, he had me in a bay right next to two of the best mechanics I've ever worked with in my life. One's name was Brian and one's name was Jason, and I worked pretty close next to them for 3 years, and yeah, it was great. It was a really great experience. I learned a lot. I got a lot of certifications. They let me just go balls to the walls with training. They let me do as much training as I possibly could. I actually passed. I was the only person ever in their shop to ever pass the electrical bypass test, which is basically the bypass test so you don't have to take the in-person test. And electrical and hydraulic is the precursors, and you have to have those done before you actually start doing capstones. And I didn't have time. I didn't want to wait 6 months for the electric class to come up and be available. So I took the bypass test and I barely passed it. I tell you what, this thing was freaking hard. And the math part of it fucking killed me. Believe it or not, electrical has a lot of math. And I barely passed it, but I did. And then I went on to get skid steer, backhoe, and grader capstone certified there. I don't know. Obviously, I had all the basics like after treatment and all that stuff there. I don't remember what else I did. I think those were the only ones that I got there. I did the backhoe first, and then skid steer, G-series skid steer, and then the grader capstone. And then I decided I wanted to move to Cheyenne, Wyoming, back to my roots, and they did not have they had a plot of land. Hanan had a plot of land in Cheyenne, but there was no building on it and there was no shop on it. They had like a regional field mechanic that was based up there, but I was in no shape to be a field mechanic, and So I interviewed at Four Rivers, the ag dealership there, and I got hired on under Tim, and I worked for that shop under the ag division for about a year, and I actually loved it. I loved it. I loved the big tractors. They let me hire right on as the large ag technician, and I worked my mentor, or my, whatever, was, his name was Nick, and he's probably one of the best mechanics I've ever worked with as well. He was an aviation mechanic in the military and still did some of that, and he's probably one of the best. He was their combine specific mechanic, but he could do anything. Worked pretty close, like he was kind of like the lead tech in a sense of that shop, and I worked there for about a year, and then I moved over to, worked there for about a year-ish, and then I decided that I really wanted to do both ag and construction. I really, really did. And so I transferred to the Four Rivers, Fort Collins location, and I worked under Dave for the next year, and I worked on, and Trish, she was the ag service manager. So I kind of worked under both of them. I bounced back and forth between both of them, and they were really awesome about just letting me work whatever I wanted. I was actually one of the only mechanics that worked on ag and construction in that shop, because I was the only one who wanted to. And then Haunted Equipment built a shop in Cheyenne, and they offered me an opportunity I couldn't pass up. Not only was it a brand new shop, but I got to help set it up, and I was going to have a much more leaderly role. Not that I wasn't going to be the service manager, but I was going to be the second in command, and the helper, right? And so I was getting a lot more opportunity to have a lot more responsibilities. So I was not only going to be one of the only shop mechanics hired, but I was going to be helping the service manager, the boss, with yard coordinator stuff, which is basically checking machines in and out that come into the yard. And then, helping customers unload their shit, helping customers load their shit, things like that. And then also I was a fill-in for the service manager. And I did that so well that I actually ended up running the shop for a few months while they were in between service managers. But actually the service manager of that shop was Jason, which, if you were listening, was one of the lead techs I worked underneath in the original Commerce City store of Haunted Equipment. And he was at the boss. And we butted heads a little bit sometimes. We're both pretty strong personalities, but for the most part, he's a great mechanic. He's a phenomenal mechanic. And then he decided to move back to Colorado, and then Eric took over after I ran the shop for a little bit. And that was pretty much it. I worked there for 2 years, and I worked pretty closely underneath Sid, who is also one of the best service managers I've ever worked for in my life. He's not just one of those bosses that's going to tell you to go do something. He was like 60 years old, and he's going to tell you to go do something, and then he's going to get in there and get his hands dirty and do it with you. So yeah, I had a lot of respect for Sid. And I worked in that shop for 2 years. That shop was an amazing experience because, like I said, for the most part, I was the only shop mechanic. And I mean, throughout my career in Four Rivers and Haunted Equipment in Wyoming, I did a lot of like little field jobs here and there and traveled to other shops to help them work. And it was just a really great experience. And that shop was small enough that it didn't matter if it was a crane or a paving piece of equipment or whatever, I got to work on it. And that was really cool. I got my mobile crane inspection certification. I got my Mini X capstone, my mid-size excavator capstone. My Cummins, actually, Four Rivers is the one who gave me my Cummins certification for the QSX 15. And I know I'm missing them, but I don't freaking remember what they are. But that was a great experience. And, I got to run the shop for a little bit, and I'm like, man, maybe I can actually do this, like, service manager thing that I'd never really considered before. Then I moved across the country and just started a new life. And I worked for a local John Deere dealership here, and I'm not going to disclose my location or the name of the dealership, but I worked there for about 4 months. And the job opportunities where I moved was actually not really what I wanted. And then Tyler got a hold of me, who is the owner of Diesel Laptops, and he's like, hey, I'm going to pay you to, be a spokesperson for my company. And, you're a mechanic, you know the ropes, you can speak mechanic. I'm going to hire you on for this. And I've been working with Diesel Laptops ever since, working on trying to get my own shop going and trying to figure out what I want to do with my own shop. I really want to build my own engines, or Cummins engines specifically, or Deere engines. And I actually just signed on with Hitachi as well as a brand ambassador. So, that is the gist of my background. I don't know how much time we have because my camera has stopped a few times. But, alright, so last little announcements. That was my background. I spent, if you were counting, it was 7 years at John Deere. Or with a John Deere dealership. And then the last 2.5 years, have been trying to do my own thing, working with other companies for social media purposes. But I'm doing this podcast because I want to share my experiences of the industry, and I want to have conversations. I want to, make this industry more popular, because this industry is super short of mechanics, and there's so much potential, not only just for women, but for men as well. Even if you're a man that has never considered going into a trade, this is a really good opportunity in this industry, and I want to bring awareness to this industry. So if you guys have any questions, or an email that you would like me to read, now do not send me oh my god, confessing your love emails. Please don't. I won't read them. My management team actually goes through my emails for me. So if you send me that, I'm not even gonna see it. The only ones that get sent through to me, the only emails that actually get sent through to me are important ones, like business emails. But my management team knows to look out for questions or stories or anything you want to be read on this podcast and have my input on. They know to look for that now. So men, women, whatever, if you guys have questions, concerns, or want to talk about a specific subject in the industry, or have a story you would like to share that you would like my input on, please email thedieselqueenofficial@gmail.com. If that is too much to write down, the email is in the link in my bio. So that is it. And that is the end of episode 1 on my podcast, and I will see you next time. Thanks, guys.